Welcome to Young at Harp. I am Kathleen Wiley, and I am here with Deborah Henson-Conant, who has just won a Lifetime Achievement Award for her contributions to the world of harping. We both play the harp. I'm a Jungian psychoanalyst, and this is why we call this Young at Harp. This is episode number 124, and today we are talking about cultivating patterns for discovery. So, almost every week, DHC and I come together with a question. We don't have the answers and we have no script. So, we invite you to join in the conversation by adding in comments, which, if the platform works properly, and we work properly, we'll see, and add into the show. But we come up with a question we want to explore that can enrich both our personal lives as well as our musical creative lives. So, Deborah, do you want to speak to this topic?
Yeah, I do. And I just want to say that, one of the things that Kathleen and I are sharing in doing this together is something we both love, which is the power of conversation, to just come together and talk about things, discover, be, speculating and, discovering and looking at things, and to include you in that, and to also share the joy of what it's like to just have conversations about things instead of telling somebody something or giving advice, but the beauty of a conversation. And so when we came together to get today, I'm just about to start the Power of Pattern Quarter in Hip Harp Academy. And I've been really looking at patterns in my own life, like destructive patterns. And yet I'm teaching patterns that will actually help people be able to improvise and get freedom. And then I was thinking how that is part of Kathleen's work as well. And I really wanted to talk about it. And when we made our sort of description together, we wrote, when you're stuck in constricting patterns of thought or action, how can cultivating patterns for discovery transform your experience and your self-expression? So I think many of us, certainly I do, find myself in patterns, self-destructive patterns. And I'll be talking to my therapist and I'll be like, I'm doing this and I'm not stopping. And yet I see, and I'm not thinking about it. I'm just doing it. And yet I see when I'm teaching improvisation and I'm showing simple patterns that you don't have to think about, that become shapes very quickly, that become intuitive, we're using that experience of not having to think to be self-expressed. So one kind of pattern seems to constrict that self-expression and pattern. So it's not patterns that are bad. Some patterns constrict, and some patterns, especially conscious patterns, can open up discovery. And in discovery comes transformation. So you can be doing the same thing, but suddenly it doesn't feel like you're locked in. I'll just give an example. I'll see if I can. I didn't really check this out to make sure. I don't know if it's working. I don't know if you guys can hear this. We didn't try this out. But when I teach a pattern like this, let's see if I can shift it just so you can see that a little, which is literally just a shape. It's a shape of anybody, whether they played the harp or not, could do this. It's a shape. It's a C, G, E, but I could also say it's the lowest red string, then it's the string above the black one, and then it's two above the red one. So I could tell you how to do it. And then you take the top part of it and you move it up a step. So literally, if somebody hadn't played the harp, they could do this. And then into that sound, you can place any notes above it, and it sounds beautiful. And as you continue to do it, it starts to become more and more creative. And when you get comfortable with it, you can actually move it to a different place. And you do the same thing. So it's a simple pattern, but it opens up creativity. And as you do it, it opens up discovery, because the more you do, it's nothing to learn. It's a little simple thing to learn. But then you start discovering, oh, if I do this, this happens. Oh, I could do it this way. Oh, I see, blah, 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 blah. And then not blah, 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 blah. And then if you're in a community like in Hip Harp Academy or in your work, well, you're one-on-one, but I'm not going to say anything about your work, but I'll just talk about mine. Anyway, so when you're in a community and people start sharing those discoveries, there's all these lights that are going off. So I would like to talk about the power of pattern, both the constricting power and the power of expansion and discovery. What's the difference?
Yeah. You know, what's the other thing to just throw into the conversation right up front is that patterns that came into being once were helpful and life-giving, but over time can then become constrictive. So what worked at one point may not work at another. And so it's not even necessarily the pattern, but it's whether it's the right fit. You
Mm.
know, patterns become habits in our life, right? I
All
mean, what
right.
is a habit? A habit is a pattern. And the value of a habit or a pattern is you don't have to think about what next. You know what's next. And so, in a way, your consciousness, instead of being all focused in the outside world about what next, can kind of pull inward a little bit and listen to what's going on internally.
Yeah, somebody said something like this. They said it's something about the pattern or the structure of the progression of a thing. That something is going from here to here to here. You don't have to be thinking or remembering what's happening, and so you can be expressive. And I think, for example, as a musician, when you're not trying to remember the progression of something, you can become musical with it. You can become physically expressive. And what's interesting about the use of this person used the word progression is that, in fact, this is a progression. Well, this is a pattern, and this is putting it through a progression. And you can even give that progression a name. It's a 1, 6, 4. 1, 6, 4. So it becomes then almost a word. Like I could say to someone, do a 1, 5, 10 pattern in a 1, and it becomes a dance.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about good dancing with a partner, if you're thinking, "Oh, I do this next," then you're missing their cues of where they're going and what you need to know to follow them. And I think our own life is like that a lot because our ego consciousness and our ideas and ideals about who we are and how we're supposed to be can get so directed out to how am I going to make it happen that we quit hearing what the larger part of us wants and what the larger self already knows about how to move forward. We've been talking these last few weeks around this idea of relaxing and being versus efforting and doing. And that somehow is a part of this, I think, conversation too around cultivating patterns for discovery, that when we are constantly doing and efforting, we foreclose on discovering because we have an idea about what it's supposed to look like. So, it's like the old joke about the flood and the man who prays for God to save him. And, someone comes along with, a little rowboat and invites him in and he says, "No, God's going to save me." And then he gets up on the roof and the helicopter comes and he says, "God's going to save me." He gets to heaven and says, "Why didn't you save me?" God said, "I kept trying," but it didn't look like what he thought. And so I think that's the kind of pattern, the kind of repetitive thinking, the belief system that is constrictive. It forecloses discovery. And what you're doing and what I experience when I work with the patterns and the progressions that you teach in Hip Harp Academy is I find that it gives me enough of a roadmap that I can then discover some things along the way. So there's enough of a pattern, the progression or the snippet, that I then don't have to be thinking about what my fingers are going to do or where I'm going to go next. And I can relax and feel into it and let the movement become informed by the felt sense of my body mind instead of thinking, "Oh, I go here next. I go here next." It's a different experience.
Yeah, so much is coming into my head as you're talking, and one of the things that's coming into my head is remembering being in music school. I didn't read music or anything when I was a
Mhm.
kid, and I got into music school, and one of the first things I saw, well, not, but anyway, in one class, there was something that's called figured bass, and it's basically a way that, you know, Bach and people around that time would write, where all you had was the melody note and then some words down like
Mhm.
6, 7, 45 down at the bottom, and the teacher said, well, that those notes at the bottom tell you what was the bass note of what was happening here. And I was like, well, where's all the music? And he was like, well, that's the part you make up. And by where's the by music, I meant where's the brilliant accompaniment? And the teacher, I'm just, it's hitting me again in a completely new way
Right.
from based on what you said. The teacher was saying, no, music is a melody, and to some extent the choice of what bass goes under that melody, and everything else you can make up, but
Mm.
that's what gives the structure. Um, and so there's very, very little there. And but if you're having to think, oh, I have to do the exact right notes of the accompaniment, that's all you're thinking of. And when you were talking about dancing, I was writing down, you said the word about hearing. You said at some point, you said hearing, and I was like, right. If you're worried about everything you're doing, you cannot listen. You can't listen to what
Right.
you're doing. You can't listen to what's happening in the music. And then when you were talking about dancing, I was remembering I had a friend that I danced with who was an amazing dancer. He knew all the
Mhm.
steps, but he was always just thinking about the steps he was doing. And so we couldn't, there was nothing really to follow. And 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 as I started dancing with more people and began to realize that part of what's beautiful dancing is to actually follow, like to be listening to a person's
Right.
body movement. You can't do that if you're worried, if either person
Right.
is worried about what the steps are. And so one of the first things you learn in swing dancing is you just learn the pattern so that that takes you along. And then you start
Mhm.
hearing, it's just as you were saying all this, I was like, I must go dancing again. This is going to make a difference. So we're talking about pattern, and we're talking about patterns that constrict us, and we're talking about patterns that um, that cultivate discovery. Now, in your work, you're a psychoanalyst.
Mhm.
In case you didn't know this, I'm just telling you you're a
Thank you
psychoanalyst.
for the reminder.
Yes, you're so welcome. And so I think, I don't know this, but I think that part of what your work is to help people discover the patterns that are destructive.
Yeah. So, one of the things that Jung said is he said that his model of psyche can give us like a generic model. He said there's a generic model. It's like the skeleton imprint, but that every individual psyche needs its own manual. So I sometimes tell people I work with, as well as in my embodiment circle, what you're going to be doing is writing your own manual, but you're not writing it, imposing it by what you think it should be. You're writing it from observing how you operate, from beginning to track what you do and what happens inside of you and the outcome. Once you know how you work, your patterns, then you can begin to intervene effectively. It's the old thing of start where you are. Most people don't want to start where they are. They feel so
Right,
shamed or guilty
right,
about where they
right.
are. And I think about my own experience, even with playing the harp,
Hmm.
that because I'm an adult beginner and married to a professional folk musician, which has been quite an interesting journey. Um, but when I could let go of feeling guilty or shamed that I wasn't somewhere other than where I was able to begin to relax and actually discover how to join in the jams that made a contribution that other people love. But when I was worried about doing it, I was imposing it because I had an idea, a patterned idea of what it was supposed to be like. And so I think this ability to start where we are and value it. You're always saying to people in the
Hmm.
academy, if it's one note, do one note. Well, it took me a long time to believe you,
I
to
know,
believe
right.
you that one note could actually make a positive difference.
Yeah, well,
Sorry.
that's because you didn't hear the guy that I heard, who was a brilliant musician,
Uh,
adding one note, and his name suddenly escapes me, but when I first saw him playing with an ensemble, and there was a moment where he put this one note in, and I was like, oh my God, that's what it means to put one note in and have it be like amazing.
right.
Oh God, there's so much that's just, I want to literally go back and listen to everything you're saying here, because I'm just getting, one of the things that I notice in the academy, like you said, is that people always feel like I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And I certainly feel that way too. And one of the big things, there's sharing in the academy. People share videos of what they're doing. And a lot of people are really scared to do that. And yet what
Mhm.
I'm doing in my coaching is one thing, almost mostly only one thing: pointing out to people what they're doing that's working.
Uh-huh.
Because most people cannot see what is working. I know I can't
Mhm.
see what's working in my own work. I just see what's wrong, what I need to fix. And yet actually being able to be aware what's working and lean into it and actually embrace it and respect it, or what you said, appreciate it.
Right.
I think that's what you said. It is one of the first steps to being able to be present.
Yes, and I'm thinking about uh, I'm thinking about how important it is when we want to cultivate patterns for discovery that we pay attention to what is working and put our focus and energy towards doing more of that instead of railing against what isn't working and
Mm,
putting ourselves down for what isn't working. In alchemy, they talk about the principle of polarity. Everything exists with its opposite and the rhythm of the movement between the poles. And
mhm,
so if you're over here with something that's too constricted,
mhm,
that's thwarting your energy flow, but there are even moments where you feel that flow, putting your attention over here and asking yourself, how can I support myself in doing more of that? That's the key. This other stuff, we keep trying to kill it off and to make it go away. And we think if we rail against ourselves, we're going to stop it. And all that
mm,
does
mm.
is cements it further, you
Right.
know? And so it's kind of like saying, okay, yeah, that's there, but this is here too. And yeah, right now, this is only taking up 5% of the space, but you know what? I'm going to live in the 5%. And then in a while, the 5% becomes 8%. Then it
Mhm.
becomes 16%. And it continues to expand to where eventually it's as big as the negative, and then it starts to be bigger.
So,
And
so yeah, so let's say I agree with you about this, and I know we don't have that much time. I was like, wish I had hours for this. Let's say I agree with you about that. I totally agree with you. How do I do it? And I mean, I'm thinking about this because I'm thinking I can
right.
listen to people and say, yes, that's a good idea, or I can read a book. Yes, oh, of course. And then shifting my life, and this is why I love this word, cultivating patterns for discovery, because you're talking about opening up those patterns for discovery, and even the pattern of looking for what's working is a pattern. And for me, I need to be around other people who are working on that themselves. And that's why I think these communities, creative
Right.
communities, where we get out of the competition that we see in the outside world, and we're actually sharing our challenges, and we're actually sharing what we're discovering, so that everybody becomes richer and hears over and over again both the struggles and the breakthroughs. These become so important. So
Yeah.
I'm realizing there's also a pattern of community, a pattern of being in community versus isolating, which is my big thing. Like, I can go off and isolate forever.
Yeah, because, if we're caught in a constricted pattern, um, and there's nothing getting fanned within us to interrupt the pattern, then
Mm.
if we're in community, we're in dialogue and conversation, then someone from the outside can say something that penetrates that closed system, and thus something new gets in.
I'm laughing because that's exactly moral of the story in The Golden Cage. And I just think it's so funny that I keep needing to learn the same thing over and over again, even though I've written this big work and that's what it's about. And yet still I need
Right.
to do that.
Yes.
We gotta, oops, I pulled this up. I haven't read it yet, but
Okay.
no, I'm not. Oh, wait, it's, but let's read it now. Connie's saying, I found fear of not knowing what came next or the people to ask stopped me from progressing.
Ah,
Yeah, and I love how that word fear and progressing is in the same
mhm,
there. Once I focus
yeah.
more on learning what's next and the people
Mhm.
who could help, I lost my fear and ventured out of my comfort zone. DHC with her evenings of and now there's more there, and we get to wonder what it is.
It's Valentine's songs off the cuff gave me direction. I think we need to find direction from other sources.
Ooh, so Connie's saying me with my evenings of, I'll have to pull it off in order to read it. With okay. Uh, Evenings of Valentine songs off the cuff gave me directions. Wow, that's so interesting. I think we need to find
Mhm.
direction from other sources. And I will say, Connie, that I had not thought about this, that taking on a project can sometimes help me get out of old patterns by
Mm.
exploring new ones. So that there were two different projects I did. I did a Christmas project where it was 14 days of silent night, just trying to play it 14 different days. And then really,
Yes.
and wow, I did 40 nights. Okay, there's 40 nights and taught me where to go. Wow. Wow. And for me, that was a challenge in actually opening myself up to romance through music, through
Mm.
songs, opening my life to romance.
Yeah.
Wow. So fear of not knowing what came next or the people to ask. That makes, you're just like my childhood is being like boom, boom, boom. I remember that. And what came next or the people to ask, right? That's beautiful. So I started following your challenges. Oh, that's great, Connie. I love that.
Mm.
And I love that you're in them. And I get that, yeah, that helps to create a new pattern. And I think that's why, yes.
Yeah, and I just want to say, because you alluded to this and Connie is pointing this out, she started following the challenges, which means she took action. So, the other piece of this, and you said something 5 or 6 minutes ago that made me think about this, is like, what do? You take an action that's different. And you know, that's the key. It's like when you want to, yeah, you have to take it. And the action may be something very simple. The action may be for me in the middle of the day when I walk by my harp, I sit down for 5 minutes.
And I'm hearing this as a practice. And Connie's saying,
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
I saw this. You did this pattern thing over and over again. I watched it. I started following your challenges, which led me to direct others. Oh, to direct
Mhm.
others. And I was thinking that it even led you to other things like that. Oh, what were you saying? Oh, what you're making
Action.
me think about is taking action and as a practice, taking repeated action. You're making me think of something we do in the academy, which we originally called ambient improv exploration. And really all it was taking a simple creative idea and doing it over and over again in a meditative way, and just seeing and then sharing what happened when I created this over and over
Mhm.
again, coming out of the idea that you can practice to get something, but a practice lets it get to you. So this leads me to thinking, what is a practice I will take on, I will promise to take on, to let it get to me, to see what that opens up. And so that's taking on a pattern.
Right.
Like you said, it's taking action, it's taking repeated action, so pattern oriented action, and then see what happens to cultivate discovery.
Right. Right. Yeah. And Connie is saying, I found a path that can take me away from my comfort zone so I know how to help others repeat. And I think this is part of the value of being in community and knowing the right people to go to and ask is that we can follow someone else's path and do it the way they've done it and listen to ourselves, and then our path can emerge, because that is really the key. And it's kind of like Jung said, our psyches are all, we all have the basic skeleton, just like we all have the basic same physical skeleton, but the unique fleshing out is different for each of us. And that's what we're talking about. You give people a skeleton that if you follow it, then it can be fleshed out in a way that's true to the music and that person. And that is truly what Jung's concept of individuation means. I mean, it really is being freed to fully embody one's own essence, not imitate another, not
Right.
try to live according to someone else's expectations, but really to follow that path that is unique to oneself, but also has common themes to everyone else. Thus, again, the value of community and sharing.
Right, right. Because, right. So Connie says finding a person who can give direction, then become creative in a way
Yeah.
that suits yourself. And I love doing it with other people because I feel like that brings ideas in that I get to look at. Oh, that, oh, that. And what you just said about Jung and this idea, what I call in the academy, internal flexible structure, a
Mm-hmm.
skeleton that you can flesh out. I would love to talk about this more because I did not know, we can't now, but another time. Um, uh, I did not know that that existed in Jung,
Uh-huh.
and what Jung had to say. I would love to hear what that is
Yeah.
and to see what that looks like in music and compare them, because I can
Mm-hmm.
understand it in music and I would love to understand it more in the psyche.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
once again, we're
Yes.
at the end. Um, uh, okay, and Connie's saying, I have to say, you finding yourself through, I'm just going to pull it up.
Mm.
I have to say, you finding yourself through communicating in the outside helps others find themselves. Yeah, as we share, I think what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying is as we share and as we share not what we know. I mean, it's okay, but as we share what we're discovering, what we're finding, that makes a difference. It has an impact on people. It opens us up, all of us. Okay, I know we have to end.
It's been
um,
great.
yeah,
Internalizing flexible structure. Maybe that'll be a theme for next week.
sure. And what I really want to do is find one action to take as a practice and
Mm-hmm.
allow it to have that as a cultivating pattern, and then see what I discover and
Yes.
then share that.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, Connie, for being such a
Mhm.
big part of this conversation. It's been really wonderful. And I look forward to seeing everybody, Kathleen and everyone else, next week. Thank you so much. And go forth and harp on the creative and open things in life.